welcome to this video. Today I'm going to run through the configuration of the Pipnotic supply and demand software, just show you what it does, how it can be configured, and tell a little bit about what it's actually doing. And so the software is designed to analyze time series data and attempt to identify shifts in momentum at certain structures in price. And this information is interesting to us because it's showing us where we have the origins of a shift in supply and demand. We also use this information to help us identify the beginnings and the ends of buy and sell zones, which we discussed in some of the webinars. And so using the software is quite simple. You simply drag it onto the chart as presented in the installation video, and the software will shortly thereafter begin analyzing the time series data and drawing these rectangles that you can see on your chart. So if I just quickly go over what these rectangles actually mean, you can see that some of these rectangles have different borders on them. So if we stick to where we currently are, you'll notice that this one here has a dashed border, and this is simply telling us that we have an area of supply that was tested but has not been completely consumed. When I say consumed, I mean that price has not traded beyond in this case, the high of the area of supply. And then we have an area below which has a dotted line as a border, and this is just telling us that the area once existed, it was tested here, and now it has been consumed. Okay, and the origin of the move that removed it is here. You can see it's just a pause in price before price finally trades through it. We have another one here. This one has also been consumed by this candle just here. Price reacted, and now price removed that area. And the reason we want to see the areas that are consumed on a price chart is because they're telling us, rather they're bringing our attention to something that's quite important, and that is answering the question, what area of supply and demand consumed this area of supply and demand. And so here we had a very valid, a very beautiful area of supply and demand. It was formed just here. Price came down to it. We formed the beginning of the buy zone. Then price moved through the buy zone and poked into this area of demand. We had a nice reaction. We moved to the opposite side of the market, to this area of supply. Price tested it several times, and then price moved away and eventually managed to trade beyond this area. And when we see something like this, you want to ask yourself the question, well, where do we have a pause in price? So we have a run in price, a pause, and then a continuation. And the continuation is responsible for removing this area of demand. You can see we had that here. Okay, and so this is where the area is that we will be looking to trade in the future. Because essentially when you're trading supply and demand, you're starting a little bit back in history, you're identifying valid supply and demand, and you're looking for those to be removed. And typically for supply and demand traders or support and resistance traders, you'll notice that an area has been respected, an area of support has been respected several times, then all of a sudden you'll notice the price moves through that, and then it'll test the backside of that area before continuing. Okay, and the same thing is happening here, but instead of support and resistance, we're looking at supply and demand, which is essentially areas where we have liquidity changing hands. We have that just here. Okay, and so I mean, here we have an area with a dash border that is an area that has been tested, but has not yet been consumed. Here we have an area that has a dotted border, which was consumed, and then you have another one, which is when we have a border of a box that has a solid border. And when we have a solid bordered box, this is telling us that we have an area that has been established but has not yet been tested. You can see we have one just here. Okay, we had this one here. This is gone. This one's gone, gone. These over here, they were gone, and this one here is not yet gone. Okay, so this one is fresh. It's untested, and so this is an area that we can expect price to react. So now this is not a perfect area. This is telling us that around this area we'll probably have some kind of a reaction in price, and that's simply because the last time price was here, we saw certain things occurring, and this is essentially we saw a pattern emerge that is typically a result of the distribution of liquidity. Okay, so this is a very interesting area for us to be mindful of. Okay, so if we just jump into the configuration very quickly, we can see here that we have a few settings. First of all, we have something related to the performance, and this as one parameter called algo execution interval, and this is set to 10 seconds. So every 10 seconds the algo will run, it'll analyze data, and it will redraw the rectangles that you can see on the chart. And I've done this simply to slow down the execution of the algo, because I don't want it to run on every tick, because this will typically result in the computer working a little bit harder than necessary. Then here we have supply and demand, and here we have two parameters, and these parameters tell us something about the pattern. And here we have risk to reward ratio, so we want price to move away 4 times the size of the area within, which brings us to the next setting, price imbalance period, so within 4 periods. And if this happens, well, then it'll draw a box. And so for this area to be visible on our chart in this configuration, we need the 4th candle after price trades or closes below these distribution candles. We want that to close, and we want that to close for at least 4 times the size of this away from the low of this area of supply. Okay, and here we have supply and demand line width. This tells us the thickness of the box. Then here we have tested supply and demand. When it's dashed, like we saw in the hourly chart, we will know that it's been tested but not consumed. And then we have consumed supply and demand. As you can see here, it's been tested here, and now price traded through it. And we want that box to have a dotted line. And then here we have appearance, and we have a few settings. Then we have a default color, and then we have the rest of the colors, and these correspond to the time frames that these areas are validated on. So here you can see that we have some blue rectangles, and Dodger blue corresponds to the 4-hour chart. So if you look up here, you can see United States dollar, Norwegian kroner, H4. So this is a 4-hour chart. Okay, and so if you're on a daily chart, then these areas are going to be red, on the weekly orange, and on the monthly, well, these are going to be purple, and so on and so forth for the remaining colors here. Okay, so if I just give you a quick example of that, let's just go down to, if we go down to the 1 hour like we were before, we can see, okay, white boxes were on the hourly chart. If you go to the daily, these are, as you may remember, the daily boxes that we saw in the configuration. So we had this area here, it was formed, price came down to it, we had a beautiful reaction, then price came down, we moved through it, we tested the area of supply that was responsible for removing that, and then price moved away. Thanks for watching.